Thank you.
Let's start with what the polls tell us is the #1 concern of people in the 2nd District, and that is the high cost of living. Now, inflation certainly has come down. That battle appears to be won, but many people are still struggling to get by financially every day, every week. Let's start with this question. What specific concrete steps can the federal government take that will help address people's problems with the cost of living?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on, and I want to just take a second to say we're thinking about the people on the west coast of Florida that are going to be affected by the hurricane coming. Very, very tragic. In terms of the economy, what I believe is driving the high rates of inflation, certainly over the past couple of years, was the high cost of energy. What the federal government did with passing legislation to invest in forms of energy that are very expensive, like wind and solar, I think has certainly driven the grocery prices to go up. Anything related to the production of goods has gone up, certainly labor's gone up. What I'd like to see is us really invest in cheaper forms of energy. I know right now there's conversations about cheaper forms of energy that are clean, such as nuclear. I think we need to look at that as a potential solution over the long run. But in terms of short-term solutions, we also need to look at keeping taxes low and continue to cut wasteful government spending so that the Federal Reserve can continue to cut interest rates. Federal Reserve has raised interest rates because of the out-of-control wasteful spending, and that's something we certainly have to look at.
Would you favor the construction of a nuclear power plant in Maine?
I don't think we're able to answer that question yet. I know that there's certain parts of the country where they are restarting some of these facilities, but that's something that we might be able to look at. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there.
All right, Jared Golden, same question. What can be done by the federal government, concrete, specific steps that would address the high cost of living?
Well, just starting by addressing inflation, Rob, certainly I was concerned about high levels of spending. As you know, I supported the CARES Act, what we call CARES 2.0 during COVID in 2020. Of course, when we got into 2021 and the American Rescue Plan was put forward by the Biden administration, I thought it was too much spending too soon, and I actually warned it could be inflationary, and so I voted no. I was the only Democrat to vote that way, unfortunately, and I still stand by that vote. I do think that it helped drive inflation. It's the same reason, in part, why I oppose Build Back Better. Reducing government spending will help put pressure downward on inflation when you're in an inflationary environment like we were. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I oppose those bills but supported the Inflation Reduction Act, which did reduce government spending. And then again, in this Congress, I've really focused on reducing even more our projected budget deficits. So we had the debt ceiling default crisis in the summer of 2023, early 2023, and the deal that we actually ended up putting together actually reduces the projected deficit. I think that's a good thing. You mentioned that inflation is getting better. I wouldn't say that it has, that we've won by any means. Prices are still higher than they were, but the Fed has acknowledged that inflation is more under control. And so they're bringing down interest rates. That's going to help with costs today. So lower loans for businesses, for homes, for cars, that's all good.
All right, I want to get to federal debt in a few minutes,
sure.
But I want to address something that's related to the high cost of living, that's part of the high cost of living. And it's a serious problem in not every town in the 2nd District, but in many towns in the 2nd District, and that is the extraordinarily high cost of housing, particularly in relation to people's incomes. How can the federal government address that? Are there specific steps that Congress and the President could take that would address the problem of such expensive housing?
I think we need more supply to meet potential demand, especially with interest rates coming down. And actually, I think it's more of a local state issue. I'd like to see more deregulation that'll make it easier to build homes in a more cost-effective manner. At the federal level, most of the discussion about housing has to do with tax credits, Rob. And while those are fine for their own purposes, I think if you want to unleash the industry that is going to be building these homes, you got to look at the regulatory side, and that's usually a local and state issue.
All right, Austin, do you see it as a local and state issue, or are there things that the federal government can do to address unaffordable housing?
Well, I think every level of government needs to take a look at this right now. Just for example, and it's being talked about, Senator Collins brought it up, we've got about 300 houses being used right now to grow illegal marijuana, and those particularly are in rural Maine. I'm glad to see that the feds are now getting involved, but this has been going on for some time. They were buying houses sight unseen with cash. A lot of those folks from New York were buying them up, and this is a criminal racket, and we certainly have to address that. But interest rates, you know, how did we get here? A couple of years ago, interest rates were fairly low, so somebody could take out a loan and make that and recoup that. If you're a local investor trying to build a 10-unit or 10 or 20-unit complex, it's very hard to see the return on investment. That's why I think we've seen at the state level, Maine Housing's gotten more involved. I like to see that increase, but once again, now we're turning this into a state issue. But driving down wasteful inflationary spending, I think, drives every part of the economy. The price of lumber, right? The price of anything to build a home right now is 40–50% more than it was just a couple of years ago. And once again, we live in a free market, and costs will dictate whether or not people want to make these investments.